Have you ever picked up an old beat up camera before and wondered if this camera could talk, what stories could it tell me? I was thinking about this recently because I picked up this Sony Mavica MVC CD500, something like that. I don't know if I got that number right. This is a camera I bought online from a reseller for $10 to $20. And they did test the camera, but other than that, they didn't seem like they knew a ton about it. This camera is cool. Like the name suggests, it uses a CD as the memory format. And you know that I'm into really weird cameras and weird memory formats of the older digital era. So this whole back area with the LCD screen and buttons opens up here. And then in the back, you have your little mini CD that spins as it records and it lights up. And it's just a really cool camera. But what's interesting about this particular camera is over on the side here, there's a little faded out barcode sticker of sorts that says what I think is Kansas Department of Transportation. And I love cameras that give you a hint about a little bit about their story. So immediately when I saw that, I thought that was pretty cool that this was used by the Department of Transportation in Kansas for, I don't know, whatever they do with cameras. But then the mystery of this camera and its owner got even more interesting when I downloaded the photos off of this CD onto my computer. And there's a lot of photos of job sites and of the highways of Kansas, but it looks more than just professional. We're trying to take pictures of the job site just so we have some technical documentation of the work going on. There's some of that as well, but then there's some way more artistic shots. And I'm making up this story, but you start to patch together this idea of the person that's using this camera is someone who's out there on the job site every day, who's tasked with using the camera to document things for whatever purpose the Department of Transportation has for that, but then just can't help when the lighting is really good to start expressing some of their creativity. And I just wonder how much this photographer did that, if they were a photographer on the side and they were just using their job's camera for fun, or if this was their first taste of photography. I wonder if they knew how good of a photographer they were. There's some shots that I really like here. And I love stories like that. I love thinking about that and the story behind a camera. Cameras are inherently cool as a human object because they see cool things and they go cool places. Unlike a lot of things in our lives where we might leave them in the car on a trip or in the hotel room, cameras go with us wherever we go. In fact, they go to the most important moments of our lives, whether that's the once in a decade trip that we're going on, whether that's the birth of a new child, an important family event, a funeral, something that's important and meaningful in our life, the camera is there with us. And that makes me think of the most famous cameras of all time. I think about the Hasselblads that made it to space and made it to the moon that I think are in the Smithsonian now. But those cameras, if they could talk, the stories that they could tell of the adventures that they've been on and the things that they've seen. And then cameras inherently have such a human element to them. They can't be used without a human. Anytime a camera is brought with you and it takes a picture, there's a human behind it with real thoughts, feelings, emotions, excitement, sadness, whatever it is that's going through their head that is trying to take a picture of a moment. And that human connection to cameras is inseparable from them. A number of years ago, I bought this Pentax Spotmatic on eBay and a lot of other items for a pretty good price. And it was beat up, but there was some good items in there. And I didn't think too much of it other than just getting a good deal and some cool vintage Pentax gear. But when I received the package, it was a whole nother story. Inside the package were all these handwritten notes that someone had made about different camera settings, different pieces of gear, how to take care of it. And I found out from talking to the seller that this was their father's camera. They themselves knew nothing about it other than their father loved it, took care of it really well, and they were just passing it on. And I felt so honored that I was the one that was able to pick it up, buy it, and try to give it some new life. Coming from somebody who had loved photography so much, loved the camera so much, there's like a bit of his soul in the camera, not really, but just that idea that this is a camera that a particular photographer loved and took with them to some very important things. And the camera ended up not working, but there was no way I was going to sell it for parts. I felt like I owed it to this photographer that I never actually knew in real life to bring back his beloved camera to life and to shoot some more photographs with it. So I used a donor Spotmatic, brought this one back to life working, and I have shot several rolls of film through it. And that's also where I got this idea to replace the really worn out grip with this epoxy and this vine. Just going with this idea of continuous growth and life, the idea that our life and our influence can go beyond when we die. And that is the case with this deceased photographer and his camera that is now in my hands, which once again just feels like a great honor. Some cameras have a rich, fascinating life before they end up in my hands, and others don't. One of my favorite things to do when buying old digital cameras is to look through the SD cards or CF cards or whatever and see what photos are on them and kind of piece together these stories. I've taken many vicarious vacations across the world to the tropics or wherever, to the mountains, through these pictures and just reliving these experiences in these people's lives. Or even photos from small town America somewhere. Some kid had a camera for a number of years and just took pictures of their everyday life. Maybe they thought it was mundane at the time, but to me, it's just so fascinating because I get an insight into someone else's world. And I know that there is a human behind that there's a story to be told there. The most common thing I find on SD cards, and you'll find this funny if you haven't guessed already, is photos of like a Christmas morning, unwrapping, take pictures of your family, and then nothing. And the camera sits in the closet for a couple decades until someone throws it on eBay. And it's kind of sad. It reminds me of like a Toy Story toy that got forgotten and thrown in the closet. But then that's kind of cool for me because here I am. I love this camera and I'm giving it new life. I'm using it today, and that's also exciting. And that goes along with the theme that cameras are often loved, forgotten about, and then rediscovered. And that's the story of this Ricoh R1. Lately, I've been lucky enough to shoot with this Ricoh R1, which was loaned to me by a Snappiness forum member. Thank you so much, by the way. And it's an amazing camera if you haven't heard of it. It's super compact 35mm film camera. It's so compact that the only reason the film canister can fit in the camera is because this grip is slightly raised. Otherwise, it's actually too small to fit in any other part of the body. So super slim. It's got an awesome 24mm wide lens on it that is quite sharp, actually. I really liked it. It's a little bit, there's some distortion and some softness if it's wide open on the very edges, but otherwise an incredible lens, and I got some really cool pictures from it. And it's undoubtedly a beautiful color. I love this green color that's on it, and you can just see how scratched up this poor thing is. The story behind this camera is awesome, what we know of it. As my friend tells the story, he was at an estate sale with a family member picking up some other items and spotted this camera in the house out of the corner of his eye. And he asked the owner if he could buy it. And they said, yeah, $10, which of course is an amazing deal because this camera goes for hundreds of dollars. I don't think he even knew what the camera was at the time. He just was into photography and saw it and thought he would get it. But of course, struck the jackpot. But then it just makes you wonder what the unknown part of this story is. How did such a high-end, very specific, compact camera end up just completely forgotten about in a house? Clearly, there was a photographer at some point who knew something probably and picked this particular camera out as the one that they wanted to shoot with. And then either they passed on or something happened to them otherwise, and this camera just kind of got left around in the house and completely forgotten about, which is crazy to think how many cameras are out there in the world. Great cameras, very nice cameras like this that a photographer once loved and admired and had picked out specially for them, and then just end up completely getting forgotten about. And then how cool it was that my friend was able to discover it and save it from probably the trash or Goodwill, which hopefully would end up to somebody eventually, but save it and be able to reuse it. So I want you to think about whatever camera you have now, whether it's new and shiny or old and beat up, what stories are you gonna write with it? If your camera could talk, what amazing adventures could it say it went on? Go out and create some amazing pictures. And if you're into old cameras like this, then check out this video I made, which I think you'll really like. I'll see you over there. And until next time, happy snapping.